Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Welcome everybody back to the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you're all well and I hope you're catching a few fish. Things have changed a little bit for me, that the fish have just about started rising. We're getting some pretty good hatches, and a lot of the hatches are happening at once. And I was speaking to my friend Andy up country just this morning, and he was saying he was experiencing a similar sort of thing, that where we've had these cooler sorts of starts, that the hatches are backed up a little bit and they're all happening at the same time, which as a fishing guide I know makes things, or can make things challenging, but it can also make you look a superstar too. But I hope you're having some good fishing. My guest today is a generous person, a skilled fly dresser and fly angler. For many years, he was the person running the fishing section of the Orvis Burford store that had a real fishing club feel about it. He has done much for our community, directly and indirectly, and is a good person to be around. I'd like to welcome my guest today, Keith Passant, to the podcast. Buddy, it's great to have you along. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty damn good, thanks, sir. I feel very honoured that you've invited me on. Thank you very much.
It's been far too long. I should have had you much sooner, but I'm really pleased that we're chatting today. Have you been fishing? Have you managed to get out and do a bit of fishing?
Done a little bit, not too much yet. Been doing a lot of instruction, basically, for beginners coming into fly casting and fly fishing and that sort of thing. But, so still water fishing up at a few of the local lakes like Lechlade and Bushy Lees. They've been pretty good. Yet to get out towards far more yet. That's planned for early part of next week. So hopefully I'll be able to drag one of our mutual amigos out there, Mr. Williams, and give him let him give me a lesson in how to cast and catch fish. I think that would be good.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And some of the fishing you mentioned there is extraordinary. I've fished Lechlade more recently, and by recently, I don't mean particularly recently. I was sort of kind of transfixed. I guess it's the lech or leech that runs alongside there, and the fish that were in there. I was sort of watching that very, very closely. But I fished Bushy Lees many years ago and had a wonderful day there. It's a beautiful fishery. And I caught the most magnificent brown trout. They said they hadn't stocked any for many years, and it was a beautiful fish, big paddle tail, and it is a pretty special fishery. For people listening, how would you describe Bushy Lees from a size point of view and as a fishery? Is it a special place for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you've explained it, really, Pete. I mean, it's 22 acres, something like that. It's got all the areas that you can think of. It's got the open bits. It's got the wide banks where you can do your long casts. It's got the sneaky beaky bits down in the wood there where you need to possibly do a little bit of wading out to get to the fish. And some of the fish in there can be really very good and very challenging, you know. I mean, it's not always an easy fishery, but its quality of the fish is really very good, you know. I mean, they stock it from sort of £3 upwards, and they throw in the odd surprise rainbows, you know, getting on for double figures. It's a really nice fishery. I mean, if you want to spend a good day, especially this time of year, they've got the mayfly coming off up there now. I was there just the other day, and it was there were mayfly everywhere. There was in all stages of the hatch, you know, fresh duns right up to the old black spinners that are doing the dance and trying to attract girlfriends, as it were. But yeah, really good fishery.
Yeah, and it's sort of a lovely mix if you wanted to go across the road to Lechlade and catch some great big fish and stalk some great big fish. But I think if you twisted my arm and said, which would you probably go for? I think I'd probably choose Bushy Lees. I think that would be my choice, I think.
I think that'd be an excellent choice as well. I mean, it's all very good going chasing the big spotties in the big lake there on Lechlade. You know, 4 fish up to £20 plus, what you're going to do with all that meat. It's a lot of fish to handle. But yeah, I mean, the Bushy Lees is a really lovely fishery. Really is a nice fishery. It's well presented. It's tidy, and yeah, good stuff.
Nice. And is it still Tim owning and running it?
Yeah, Tim still runs it, still owns it, and drives around and has a little chat with you, see how you're getting on. He's got a great team there. He's got a young lad there that's doing the fishery grading and all the rest of it, and some of the work, and young Charlotte on the reception and in the shop, and they both work really hard up there, and they do a cracking job. Really is a good fishery.
Nice. And the other fishery you mentioned was Farmore, and I have never fished there. And the reason isn't because I don't want to or anything like that. I've just never got round to it. And you know me, it's really going to be hard to drag me away from a river. But I remember my friend Nick Hart writing a blog post many years ago, and his title of the blog post, and that shows how many years ago because it was a blog, was called F Me Farmore, because he had such an extraordinary day there and the strength of those fish that were in that fishery. Can you tell us a little bit about Farmore, where it's based? And I think there's 2 lakes or reservoirs, isn't there, that you can fish. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, absolutely. Farmore is just outside Oxford. It's just in a village called Cumnor, and it's as you say, it's 2 lakes. One of which is there, if we use that word, catch and kill, or put and take. Let's use put and take. It's a bit more friendly, isn't it? But user friendly. And then they have the catch and release lake as well. The quality of the fish in both sides is really good. You say that you're that getting your string pulled, as it were, by some of the big fish there. There are some cracking fish in there. I mean, you can have a really good day up there on the catch and release lake, and some of the fish up there are 6 and 7 pound, and they've been in that lake in the reservoir for quite a long while. And you know when you're attached to one, I can assure you of that. And the great thing about it is it's actually, whilst it's a big piece of water, it's also quite nice for taking beginners and people that are just getting into fly fishing too, because some of the occasions you can get to are the fish will come really close in on the bank. And they're very, very happy to take a dry fly. So you're not always going to be throwing blobs and boobies and big stuff like that. You know, I mean, I've fished up there with buzzers, and some of the buzzer hatches up there are absolutely phenomenal. And you can be fishing size 14 and 16 buzzers up there and getting lots of fish off the top. And it's amazing fishery. Really is good fishing. And you've got a great team of guys up there that look after the place, you know. I mean, they know what's going on, where it's going on. The other side to it as well is there's also becoming or developing there quite a big predator sort of side to the fishery. They've got some very, very good big perch in there. They've got some big pike in there, and there are it's one of the lesser known ones. I mean, everybody knows about chew. I think somebody I know who I may be speaking to had a fairly nice ESOX just recently down on chew. Well, they're very similar in Farmore, and same tactics. But you can fish off the bank for them, and you can fish off the boat for them. And as I was saying about the beginner side to it, I mean, the people are not having to cast a long way. I mean, if you're casting 50 feet some evenings, that's a long way at the fishery. That's how close the fish are coming in. And it's smashing fishing, smashing, really lovely stuff.
Nice. That sounds fantastic. And the pike thing, obviously, I'm still suffering greatly from imposter syndrome at the moment. But what you said I thought was really interesting about beginners fishing there and the fish coming in close and the buzzer hatches, because that sounds a fabulous place. as you well know and if anyone's listening as well and trying to think about getting their children into fishing or friends who haven't done it, a great way, because when somebody's learning to cast, it becomes all encompassing and people sort of don't enjoy the fishing aspect of it. But a great way to allow them not to have to worry about that is to just give them an indicator and a buzzer and let it hang for a bit and let it, so they're not focusing, right, I've got to retrieve it in, I've got to cast it out again. And that sounds a great fishery to be able to do that. You've got the chance of catching a fish. You don't have to cast a million miles. They eat the buzz as well. So that sounds a nice place to take somebody to have a go by, sounds of it.
Completely. I've frequently taken people who've never picked a fly rod up before up there, and all they're doing is a little roll cast off the bank, and they're getting into fish, and it's really good. The great thing about it as well is you mentioned the buzzer fishing, and the buzzer fishing up there is awesome, absolutely amazing. Some of the guys that have been long-time members up there have become specialists in that, and fishing the, shall we say, the indicator, they're really good at it. But the other side to it is the dry fly fishing. Daddy longlegs, August, September, you will have so much enjoyment, so much fun getting up there, fishing a dry fly. And again, you're not casting a long way. I mean, if you can cast 60 feet, you're in amongst the fish. Really are. It's a cracking fishery. Love to death.
Nice. That sounds fantastic. Well, we talked about still waters, and I just wanted to get a sense of moving water for you and how much of a part of your fishing that actually is as well, and rivers. And I know a number of years ago now, we spent a lovely day fishing some of the streams down here in Devon. Are rivers kind of on your radar in quite the same way, or would you say your passion's a little bit more towards the still water?
No, absolutely. Rivers on my radar like you would not believe. It's just getting at them, really, because living where I do, which is in the south and Wiltshire and whatever, as you can imagine, the cost involved can be a little bit excessive. Now, how do you go about that? Do you actually join a club and pay their rates and fish the hell out of things? I've done that. I've fished on the Services dry fly water, which is Mr. Sawyer's old water, and had the first season. I think I fished probably 300 days through the year, which was a ridiculous amount of time spent chasing grayling and brown trout down there. And then the second season, I fished it 2 days because work commitments and all the rest of it just would not allow, But now what I do, they have a special ticket down there which you can, ex-services guys can get, and it's what they call a grayling season ticket, and that runs from October through to March, and I buy that, and I can guarantee you that if the rivers are low at the end of September, October, early October, then within a week of me buying my ticket, the rivers will be up, flooded, brown, chocolate, lovely, and probably last like that for the next 2 months, which is just ideal. But no, I absolutely love fishing rivers. That day we spent down on your rivers down there, there is one fish which we both know about, and I'm not going to bring that into the conversation. But it was I just love fishing rivers, especially the small rivers down around the Little X and those sort of places. Really lovely little rivers. And yeah, I mean, I won't get into the politics of it, but up here we've seen a fair bit of degradation of the rivers up in Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire, with the dreaded word pollution. We won't go into that too far, but even when the rivers are a mess, you will still see trout rising to, especially this time of year, and you would never think that they would hatch, is mayfly. I fished on the Windrush mainly because I worked in Burford for the mighty Orvis, and fished on the Windrush this time of year water that you would think nothing is going to see a mayfly come out of, and looking at the water you would think there is not a chance that a mayfly is going to come out of that, and they do by their thousands. It is amazing. I've seen the car park in Burford where I used to work with cars with little green dots all over it, which would be the mayfly egg sacs this time of year. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. Nature, I guess, will prevail at some point, but yeah, give me a river or a still water or a puddle, I'll have a go at it, mate.
Nice. And that last thing that you actually mentioned as well, to me, makes me even more angry, because despite every barrier we put in front of the fish, the bugs, the whole ecosystem, they're still bloody trying. And that's what makes me really angry about this thing, that we're having, we're putting these barriers and nature's still trying its utmost. But we'll try and move on before I start to rant a little bit. And I just want
I could join you in the rant, Pete, without a doubt, mate. But
absolutely. And I'm sure many people listening as well. But tell me, how would you, for our listeners, describe yourself as an angler?
Oh, wow. Pretty multi-purpose, really. I started off the same as everybody else, probably, which was, of people of a certain age, shall we say, with the old net jamdar and the sticklebacks in the local pond and whatever, trying to catch those. And then in the UK, a bit of coarse fishing, which is, I guess the rest of the world would just refer to as warm water fishing. And I did that for, I still have a go. So I'm still doing it, which is, I guess, near on 60 years after I started playing with fishing stuff. So, yeah, pretty wide ranging. Most of my fishing is fly fishing. I like to have a go on the beach. I love to have a go for the saltwater species, especially with a fly rod. But I'm not averse to putting a bait caster rod out there, a beach caster, and just putting 4 ounces of lead and a squid as far out as I can get, which is usually about 30 yards. And then a bit of boat fishing. Don't mind a bit of boat fishing. So yeah, pretty wide ranging, but predominantly fly. Yeah. Predominantly on the fly.
Nice. And, you're a very experienced fly angler that's fished in a lot of places and done a lot of stuff. And also, for me, you're also very synonymous with fly tying. And did that start as an early part of your fly fishing journey? Did you realise, right, I've picked up a fly rod, I'm tying on a fly that's made out of fur and feather, I think I'd like to do this? Did they go hand in hand for you?
Completely. The first time I picked a fly rod up was on a holiday in Scotland on the River Spey. And I hired a fly rod from the Nethybridge Hotel, fishing on the Spey in the dark, weighed in with my wellies on. Never touched a fish, but was completely bitten by it, if you like. Came back home from the holiday, borrowed my dad's Milbro glass fly rod, and the first occasion that I actually went fishing locally here in Swindon was on a fishery called Lower Moor, and the owner of the fishery, you had to book to go and fish it. So I called them up and I said to the guy on the other end of the phone, I said, "Is it easy?" Bearing in mind that I just started fly casting. He thought I was referring to, is the fishing easy? And he was, shall we say, upset. He was a little bit upset with that. So I said, no. What I'm interested in is easy casting. I've only just been fly fishing twice, and this is my third time. And he said, "Oh, right, yeah, fine." So off we went. And the first fish that I actually caught there was on an Invicta, fished as a dry fly, which is probably against all the rules, totally. And I could still see that fish coming up through the depths and taking that Invicta like it was going out of fashion, Amazing. Awesome stuff. So that was my first fishing experience really on still waters because of various reasons. But shortly after that, I joined the Fly Dressers Guild, and I joined the local branch of that, which was in North Wiltshire. And I've been tying flies there. I'm just going back to seeing them again now down there because I've been away for a little while. But I was a member of that for probably since 1986, right up until about 4 or 5 years ago. That dropped off a little bit, but I'm back there now, and the gentleman that taught me to tie my first fly is still there and still goes on a Thursday night every week and ties his flies. He's a lovely chap. Ian White, smashing guy.
Nice. That sounds fantastic. And do you remember then, so you caught a fish, and I was similar to you, and I think many people probably are. If it bites and when it bites deeply, first 2 times I went, I didn't touch a fish, but I didn't care. And then when I did catch one, I was so shocked and it was a put and take fishery. So I took it and walked home. The guy said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I caught a fish." I was so shocked that I'd caught a fish and I'd got it in the net that was it basically. But do you remember that first fly that you tied and the first fish that you caught with it?
Yeah, it's amazing. When I first started fly tying, I didn't have a fly tying vice, so I was working at the time for a garden machinery company, and they used to get all sorts of scrap machines come in that were, all they were doing was going to go in a skip, and it was going to go to be weighed in at some point. And some of the machinery had parts on it that were very much shaped like an AA vice. If you can imagine, there's the stem and then there's a 45-degree angle piece of metal coming off that. So that was my first fly tying vice. I cut a slot into it, drilled a hole through the tube, through the metal, and nut and bolt. And that was my first vice. And it was like a couple of spanners to put a fly hook into the vice, tighten it up. And yeah, but I mean, we went on from there. We sort of, some of the stuff that I've tied with that vice was quite amazing. I think it was a catch whisker that I tied was the first fly that I tied on that and actually caught a fish on at a local little fishery called Churn Pool. So that was really good. But yeah, I mean, fly tying is a big part of my what I do now. I mean, I love showing people how to tie flies. Any questions on it, and taking people from beginner and now as an instructor as well. I like to take people on from that, move them on and push their limits and my own. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still learning this trade. There is so much to pick up and to learn in this fly fishing and fly tying lock that we do. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's ever evolving, and particularly from a tying point of view, be it materials or anything else. But I wanted to fire this one at you as a master tyer. What's the difference between fly tying and fly dressing? Is there a difference, or is there a definition of one versus the other?
I don't think there is a definition, Pete, to be honest with you. I think fly tying is making flies to go and fish, like buzzers and small lures and various bits and pieces, dry flies, whatever you want to tie to go and actually fish with. Fly dressing might be more the classic sort of fully dressed salmon flies and such that we're talking about. But it's just terminology, I think, really. Fly dressing, fly tying. I think it's a bit of both worlds, really, and they frequently come and cross over. I think when I first started tying flies, I was obviously tying trout flies and what have you because of that's what I was fishing a lot of. But I also tied some salmon flies as well. And the problem I found with tying salmon flies back in the day, and still find to this day, to be honest with you, is getting hold of the right materials to tie the flies as we see the recipe. So if you see a recipe for a pattern from Mr. Kelson, for instance, he's quite specific in what he says should be included in the fly. Now, what we have to also remember is that nowadays, a lot of those flies materials are actually on the CITES list. Busted and that sort of stuff is a no-go. You're not going to pick that up from Mr. Vineyards. Great as Vineyards are for their fly tying materials, you're not going to pick up any busted or whatever from them. So there's a gentleman who's been a great influence on my fly tying recently, and I say recently in the past 5 or 6 years. He's a guy you probably know. He's a young lad by the name of Paul Little. And we've had this conversation where we've said fly tying and matching the materials to the pattern. Are we right to try and find absolutely the blue chatterer and the busted and all the other materials that are out there that would have been included in Kelson's patterns back in the end of the mid-1800s? Nowadays, they're not so available. And the conversation goes something like, the guys would have used, without a doubt, the materials they had available. They would not have gone out of their way to go down to the predominantly hat-making companies and try to buy their fly tying materials from them, the exotic feathers and such. So they would have used what they had. Some of the most exotic materials would not have been available to Fred Bloggs living in Speyside to tie a full-dressed Jock Scott, Mr. Ordinary would not have been able to get hold of it. So he would have substituted what he had to hand. And I think that's a part of it. I think we get too tied up in it's got to be what it says in the pattern. Think of a substitute. Okay, if it wants chatterer, it wants a blue feather. So find a blue feather that is similar to. And materials for that you're going to come across relatively easy. You're still going to pay a little bit of money for them, unfortunately, is Chinese kingfisher skins. You can get hold of them, and they're not that far out from what chatterer looks like. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. And it's quite interesting to see people, now using more synthetic materials as well with fly dressing and fly tying. Some of the stuff that's out there now is just awesome. Absolutely awesome kit out there. If you look at some of the threads we're using now, one of the best, and I'm a recent convert to it, is a material called Semperfly Classic Waxed Thread. It is absolutely awesome material, and I apologise to you, Pete, for dropping an advert there. But I'm not sponsored by them, not looked after by them at all. But it's just a really, really good material. Fly tying and fly dressing, I think if you were to split it right down the middle, you could say that fly tying is for tying your flies for your fishing. Fly dressing is for your stuff that you might fish but are more likely to frame. Put in a frame, stick on the wall, give to a friend, say, here you go, Harry, this is for you. That's my view on it.
Yeah, I like that as well. And it's fascinating what you said about the materials. And I'm sure you've read it, and I know I've read it, and listeners will have done as well, The Feather Thief, which is a fabulous book about a guy who entered a world of chasing down these Speyside patterns from Kelson's books from many, many years ago, from the 19th century, and chasing down these materials and the lengths that people, him in particular, went to by robbing the Natural History Museum of, I think it was Alfred Wallace's collection from the Galapagos. Wallace never got the plaudits that Darwin got. I actually read Wallace's book many, many years ago, and he was actually talking to Darwin at the same time about evolution and everything else. and he collected birds and brought them back. And the guy broke in, nicked a load of feathers, and then subsequently sold them on eBay and places like this. And if you get a chance to read it, and as I said, I'm not really I do tie flies, but it was a fascinating read. It's a really, really interesting one as an aside. But thank you for explaining that, and that makes perfect sense to me. What is it that you most love about fly tying then? What is it that really excites you about it?
Well, really, it's taking something which is totally inanimate and sticking it all together, a few bits of this, few bits of that, and putting it in front of a fish and seeing if that fish is in the very slightest way interested in eating it. I mean, I've got to the stage in my fly fishing, I think, Pete, where I actually tie flies, go fishing with them, and if a fish comes to the fly but doesn't take it, that's a Yahoo moment. That's a sort of, tricked you into thinking that was almost right to eat. It's always better, obviously, when the fish does take it and eat it and sticks. But, I mean, I just love the fact that we can stuff all these bits of material onto a piece of metal and fool a trout. Now, and I know, trout are not silly. So actually doing a little bit of fly tying and putting the right fly in front of them and getting a reaction is just awesome. Absolutely awesome in my view.
That was beautifully described as well. And I loved how you said putting an inanimate object in your vise and then bringing it to life. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. I think that's really cool, and I'm going to steal that and use that myself because it's so
Please
good.
Do.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. You said about fish aren't silly and they are smart. I will throw this story that Warren has told me, and I think probably Jim, that they were on a particularly tricky fish, I think on the Wiley somewhere, and you were along there fishing with them. And they were fishing tiny little flies, and you put this huge, great, was it hopper pattern on? And this fish just came out. It wasn't going to eat anything until you threw that hopper pattern at him. And I mean an American foam by the sounds of it anyway, or a stonefly pattern. And this thing just came out of nowhere and ate it. That must have been quite pleasing, wasn't it?
Oh, that was awesome. These guys, I mean, Warren is an exceptional fly tyer. Jim, he'll put a fly wherever you ask him to. Excuse me. And they'd both tried at this fish, and it was not having it, and they were chucking their little flies at it, and it was just sort of ignoring them. And I thought, right, we'll put something big and horrible on. And I put I think it was getting towards a Chernobyl ant sort of size type thing, Huge, great thing. So if it hit a tree or hit a branch, it was not going to stick. It was bouncing off it. And the cast itself was quite difficult because it was the fish was under a bank, under a low-lying branches and all the rest of it. The absolute archetypal, most difficult cast in the world type of thing. And we managed to bounce the fly off a branch. It went under the branch, and the fish just sipped it down like it was a size 18 blue-winged olive, and it was awesome. And the two gentlemen that we're referring to, I don't know whether we say slightly impressed or slightly annoyed, but there was a reaction, and the fish was on the bank, and it was great. It was on the top end of the Wiley, up near the very top end of the Wiley. Wonderful piece of water.
Fantastic. I know that. I fished it a few years ago now. But do you think we live in a world where... Do you think we're lulled into thinking we need a load of materials? When it comes to somebody, say you've got, it may be a beginner, it may be an intermediate tyer. I'm fighting this thing to say dresser now, but an intermediate tyer or a beginner. Do you think it's easy to be lulled into that? And I remember when I started, I bought one of these kits, which, there's some great stuff in there. But subsequently, I've sort of said to people, look, learn to tie 3 or 4 patterns and then add to that a little bit. But do you think that we can sometimes be lulled into thinking, well, we need this, this is this, we need this, we need that, when we don't really. How do you feel about that?
I completely agree totally with you, mate. I think we do get lulled into sucked into the bit where must have this material. If I haven't got X, Y, Z, it ain't going to catch fish. Well, that's complete rubbish, to be perfectly honest with you. One of the things that I like to teach beginner pupils fly dressing is the very simple thread buzzer. And it is just thread. It is black thread. There's nothing else to it. And it's a case of putting the hook in the vise, and we take the thread down to the bend, round the bend a little way, come back to the eye, come back 2/3 of the way, back to the eye, back 1/3 of the way. And that's putting your profile into the fly. It's giving you the little carrot shape that everybody talks about. And then we go back to the eye, we'll finish it off. And it teaches a couple of things. It teaches that you get to know how the thread works, how much pressure you can put on that before it snaps. So it teaches you that little lesson. It teaches you how to put a shape into a fly. It teaches you how to finish the head off on the fly. And the other thing it does, when you take it fishing and you catch your first trout on it, it teaches you that you do not need a lot of materials. It's absolutely. I mean, I've got to the stage now in my trout flies where I'm using sort of 2 or 3 materials, and that'll do, and 4 if you include the thread. But yeah, I mean, it does not have to be overcomplicated, and you do not have to have all the very latest materials that are out there, etc., etc. Now, I understand completely that there are manufacturers out there that are producing materials for us all the time. Oh, you ain't going to catch fish if you don't use X, Y, Z. And that may be the case. I think it's more the case where people should be looking at tying really good quality flies that will take fish after fish and not fall apart after a couple of fish. So if you're using materials like that and tying your own flies, you need to make sure that all your turns of thread are good, all your materials are tied in properly. It's nicely dubbed on if you're using a dubbing body, quill bodies, bit of glue, bit of super glue, a bit of varnish on the body. We were talking about Warren early on. That guy has been tying flies for a relatively short time, but some of his catskill patterns that he's tying are awesome. Oh, my goodness me, there's some lovely flies he ties. But if you look at a catskill pattern, there's not a lot to it. There's a bit of tail material, which is the same material as your hackle. There's maybe a quill body, wings, and a hackle, and that's you done. And the hackle, as I've already said, is the same as your tail. So you're not buying. That's maybe 3 materials that you're buying. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. By the same token, if you are tying flies for dressing, shall we say, going back to our tying and dressing conversation, I think that the dressing materials, dressing flies with lots of very nice materials, a la Paul Little and Marvin Nortley and those sort of guys, these guys will tell you whatever you want, and they are absolutely beautiful, artistic piece of work. But the great thing about them is they fish them as well. Lots of Swedish tyers. Jonas Anderson is a great tyer, and he's tying flies, full dress flies that we would call, showcase material. He's tying them to fish with, and that's awesome. But when you first start tying, and when you're moving on in your tying career, shall we say, it doesn't have to be 52 materials on one hook called Mr. Scott. It's absolutely not necessary, mate.
Nice, perfect. Does that mean as a result then when you go out fishing, you don't use a whole bunch of patterns?
Absolutely. I think I'm probably like a lot of fly fishers. I'll go out with maybe 7 or 8 fly boxes in my bag, and I'll use 3 patterns all day out of the same fly box that I used the last time I went out. The extra fly boxes are what I call my comfort blanket. They're there just in case. I think one of the greatest materials that's been used just recently and come to the fore is called the canard, CDC. That material will tie you 1,000 flies of any different, even salmon patterns, mayflies, blue-winged olives, nymphs, all sorts of stuff. And it's just such wonderful material. One of the guys I know, Stuart Tanner, he's an absolute artist with the stuff. He's a really lovely guy, and some of his CDC patterns, he won't show you them because he's a bit of a secret squirrel. But CDC and Stuart go together wonderfully well, mate. I tell you, he's a great tyer. There's a lot of very good fly tyers around, but some of the guys are just pushing the envelope a little bit with these new materials, and it's good to see. I like to see it.
Nice. I have some of Stuart's CDC emerges, and they work very, very well. So yes, absolutely, I can say a thumbs up for those. Tell me, you are an AAPGAI master tyer, and I know that would be no easy task to attain. What does that involve? I know that will be a difficult task, but what did that involve, and was that a challenging process for you?
Oh wow, that was you've heard the climbing mountains bit. That's absolutely the case with the master's level on that. Even if you go back to the provisional level, which is now called professional and various, even if you take it right back to that level, if you pass those examinations with AAPGAI, you know you're doing well. As for the masters, it's designed to actually push you as far as you can go, and to try and get you to come out the other side. Some of the patterns that we tie are within the examination are old style patterns, which are, to get them to look right and to tie right, have to be, you have to use the right materials. You have to know what you're doing with the materials. You have to know about how these materials are going to react when you pull the string, as it were, when you tighten the thread down. Is it going to roll over? Is it going to pull to one side? Is it going to, go out of line, etc.? And you have to know all those little quirks and ways it is with the materials. We also like to know, or master's level, that we always like to have a story, don't we? And a little bit of history with stuff like that. So you need to know about the fly. Need to have a little bit of history to it as well. But without a doubt, at the end of the day, you have to be able to demonstrate how to tie that fly, a little bit of information on it, recognise the materials if they give you some materials to tie. As it's a stiff examination. It's nearly 5-hour examination. And once you come out of there, you're ready for a shandy, I can tell you.
Yeah, I bet.
You've done it with your casting with AAPGAI, and you know the levels of expectation that they have, very high, and rightly so. I mean, and it's the same with a lot of the associations that we talk about. AAPGAI, I think, are very, very much the case that they push or strive for the highest standards. But that also applies to the other instructor associations that are out there, like FFI and Gaia and all those sort of guys. They're all great associations, and they all have really tough levels for you to be able to wear that badge. And I think that's right.
Nicely put. And yes, I like where you're coming from with that completely. You've given lots of information about tying as well already. Let's just, because time's moving on, I want to talk about your role, Orvis, because I thought it was really special. But give me, for somebody who's listening here, is probably not a beginner. So let's say they're a tyer. What is the one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring and improving fly tyer, what's the one tip that you always try and pass on to people?
If you can, wherever you may be, there's a little association called the Fly Dressers Guild. They have some amazing fly tyers within that association, and they have branches all over the UK. Outside of the UK, there's also a few FDG branches, the Fly Dressers Guild, and but there are also other guys that will give you some instruction. Go and see somebody that has been tying for a while, has a good reputation in your area, is prepared to spend a little bit of time with you and give you some good pointers. And, I think that's really important, that you see somebody, even if you sign up for a course, I mean, Orvis, going on to the Orvis side that you're talking about, they run their fly tying courses. AAPGAI run fly tying courses. I think Gaia do them as well. And, if you can get to them and go and do a course with somebody that's been tying for a long while, the great thing is they will teach you to tie the flies, but there's always, always, always going to be the situation where you'll get snippets of information, little nuggets of information that are massive. And you can, if you take that one or two things away from your course or you chat with the guy, then, it's got to be worth every penny that you've spent on any instruction with them or, doing the course and such. But go and see somebody that has been tying for a while, has got a good reputation and is well known and knows what he's talking about.
Nicely put. As you said, and I've said, I wanted to move on to your work with Orvis. And the reason I say that is that, Emma and I happened to be in Oxfordshire and I said to him, I've got to go in and see Keith and to say hello. And that quick hello turned into a good hour and a half plus of just putting the world to rights about fishing. But the fishing section was upstairs in the store and it was pretty special. It had a really personal touch, a feel to it. It was beautifully laid out. I don't belong to any clubs that have club rooms, but I would think if it was a fishing club or a fishing den, that would be it. Was that something you set out to do, and did it evolve, or did you just decide this is what you were going to do with it when you started there?
Pretty much the last thing that you said there, that this is what I'm going to do. What I wanted to do was get people to come into the store not feeling that if they come into the store, they're going to have some salesman in their face trying to sell them an expensive fly rod or reel or, the latest pair of waders, etc. I wanted people to come into my store in Burford in Oxfordshire there and be able to come in and just have a chat, chew the fat about how many fish they caught this week or hadn't caught this week and why hadn't I caught them. So we'd discuss that and try and go through it. And you're dead right. I absolutely tried to make it, if you like, the old cliche of a club room. It was absolutely one thing that I tried. And I was very lucky when I first started at Orvis. The manager, John Wilson, was all for it. I mean, John's the amount of experience that John has in all kinds of fishing. He loves his tench fishing, but he's just so experienced in his fishing. And some of the things he used to come out with, I'd scratch my head and think, where the hell's he got this info from? It was almost had the imprint of his sole of his shoe on it. It was right where he dragged it from was way down in the depths there. He was great. And the other thing was that the then managing director of Orvis, Michael, was such a great guy. He lived in Burford and he used to come in on a weekend and say, the story's looking great. And that wasn't just my department; it was the downstairs as well. But he used to come in and encourage what we were doing, and with that, we actually built a clientele and. It was able to make it like, right, I'm going to go and see Keith for a chat, and that's what I wanted, because at the end of the day, it wasn't like selling to people that you'd never met and, here, have a fly rod, I'm going to take your money off you and I'm not bothered if I see you again. it was a case of, here, have a fly rod, I'll take your money off you, and come back and tell me how you got on with it. And if you don't like it, we'll sort it out. And if I need to give you a little bit of help in what the fly choice and that, come and see me. And if there's a problem with your rod, come and see me. Absolutely, open arms is how I used to run that store. And it worked because we were quite successful. Really were.
Yeah, it was a lovely spot to visit with the river, like you say. I think it was the Windrush at the bottom there,
Yeah.
and seeing everything that you'd set up there. And I guess you saw a fair few changes in tackle while you were there, didn't you?
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, when I first started there, we were selling a particular rod, which was the TLS, which was at the time one of the best rods on the market. It was a super rod. It was really nice. It was getting towards the modern trend of faster rods. We went through a period, didn't we, where people were, we've got to have the fastest rod on the market. Whether we can use it or not, we've got to have the fastest rod on the market. And Orvis were going through that period. And then they did the TLS and they did a few other rods as well. And they moved it through to lighter fly rods, faster recovering rods, lighter resins, lighter materials for the actual building of the fly rods. And they actually did move fly rod manufacture forward quite a long way. None more so than recently with a guy called Sean Coombs, who's now there, and he's taken their kit on leaps and bounds, absolute leaps and bounds. But they haven't gone away from the other side to it as well, I mean, they did the superfine range of rods. When I first started there, it was a superfine, which was a river rod, and it was up to about 8'6", and it was a through action fly rod. It was a full flex, as they call it, which bent right down to the down to the tip. It used to worry some customers when I'd show them and get them to hold the tip of the rod and then bend it almost double. They get a little bit jumpy, a bit nervous. There were several. Don't do that. But that was really, really good. But they still carried on with that, and they still actually manufacture bamboo fly rods, which I believe someone I know is fairly in love with. I've got one of their bamboo rods, and it is really lovely. It's a lovely stick. So the changes in tackle, yes, I've seen them go from fairly innocuous type of rods right the way through to the quick stuff that they've got now in the Helios 3. One of the more recent rods that I've seen has been the Sage R8. That is really a very nice fly rod. And that's coming from me and Orvis, man. One of our biggest competitors, if you like, and theirs is Sage. And you have to acknowledge the fact that the technology within fly rods has moved on massively in the past 12 years, 10 years, I mean, it's just jumped leaps and bounds. And it's not just those two companies. I mean, there's the likes of Loomis and the likes of Loop and all those other companies, that are out there that are making really good rods. I don't believe myself, this is a personal view, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I do not believe there is a bad rod on the market now. There are just different price points. Manufacturers can't afford to produce a fly rod which is not up to scratch because they won't sell. You guys out there that are buying fly rods are not idiots. You know what you want, you know what you want it to do, and if it's a piece of junk, you're just not going to buy it, and absolutely that's exactly how it should be. And it's great to see these manufacturers that are bringing in rods at all sorts of price points. And for rods around the 120 quid mark and cheaper, Mr. Shakespeare, he's still knocking them out there. His Odysseys, they're absolutely cracking little sticks, But, it's seen some changes, all good stuff.
Nice. And I think that's very sweet that you, having retired from Orvis, was it 3 or 4 years probably now, that you still refer to Orvis as we, which I think speaks volumes for your fondness for that company.
Yeah, there's some good guys there, some really good people that work there. Shame that they went down the pan in 22. For whatever reason that was. I'd left the company by then, so I'll never get told why they went. But unfortunately, they've gone. We've got one shop left in Stockbridge now. We again. Sorry about that. We're still there, still knocking it out, and some really great people work within that. And it's great to see. I wouldn't say necessarily off the back of Orvis, but with the clientele team and all the rest of it that they built up in Derbyshire was the Bakewell store, which was the Orvis Bakewell, which is now Mallon and Green. Marie Mallon and John Green have started an absolutely awesome little fly shop there. It's it's what everybody's dream would be, is to have a shop like that, and they're doing a great job with it. But yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of respect for the guys that worked at Orvis, and it's quite a fun place there, I guess.
Fantastic. And yeah, shout out to Malin Green. I was actually talking to Marie today, and Fly Culture will be going on tour there as well in July. So I'll be announcing details of that very soon. But as part of our thing to get communities and groups of people together, and to hopefully get them down to their local fly shop as well. So that's cool. Now, we live in a world where this is a new section that I've only had 3 or 4 on the last 3 or 4 podcasts or so. We live in a world where every day on the water, social media would make you think every day on the water is absolutely perfect. Sadly, I still don't have them. But have you had any train wrecks while you were fishing? Anything that went horrifically wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one that comes to mind when we were fishing on a certain little brook of yours down your way, if you remember. That fish that was rising under the tree, and I promptly stuck the fly straight in the tree and couldn't get it out. But there we go. That sort of train wreck. The other side has been, turning up, expecting the river to be absolutely perfect, and it's been chocolate, and just fishing for long time and not getting a nibble, a nudge, a pull, nothing at all. We've all had those days, and sad to say, we've had the instance where we've taken the top 6 inches off of a fly rod inadvertently, trying to be a smarty. I did that on a stillwater, trying to be a clever butt, and the fly had been taken by the fish, and it was just in the top lip. And I thought, it was only a buzzer, so there's nothing to get in the way. So I pulled the leader right the way through to the tip top on the fly rod. Fish was still in the net. Well, no, he wasn't in the net. He was in the lake. And just as I pushed to release the fly, he decided, I don't like that. Shook his head and snapped 6 inches off the top of the fly rod. So, don't try and be a smarty. That's my sort of suggestion to everybody that thinks it's a good idea. But there you go. Yeah, train crashes happen. Just got to live with them.
Yeah, and learn from them.
Yeah, learn from them, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really cool. What have you got planned for this year? Have you got any trips in the diary? Are you heading abroad? What are you planning for this year?
Well, nothing excitingly massive going ahead this year. I'm going to try and do a trip up to Scotland. Jim and I went up a couple of years ago and fished on the Sutherland locks up there, and that was lovely, fishing a 4-weight rod for sort of 6-8 ounce fish and having a great time on the boat. I've been invited to go out to Fernie in British Columbia, September. I'm hoping that's going to come together, and we're going to have a little trip out there. Got coastal fishing trips coming up through the summer. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of bass fishing in. And that's about it at the moment, mate. But I'm always looking to plan. So if you get any ideas, and we can get out and chuck some fluff, then let's do it.
Well, there's always a river down here waiting for you. And that one, I think you're being far too harsh on yourself. That was just a really nasty fish in a nasty spot. And he just weren't going to eat no matter what. So, but steelhead, if you're going to steelhead fish, I've caught steelhead on spey flies and tie some of those up and use those. My friend Duncan tied me some, and I caught some steelhead on the Deschutes. And I fished them somewhere else, I think, and the Rogue, I think I caught some steelhead on those. And it's great fun to do, and it's a lovely nod to tradition and great fun to do. So, yeah, if you do end up going, I'd highly recommend having some of those in your fly box. And
yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love tying is spey flies, They're really elegant-looking flies. Absolutely. The upturned racing boat, for the wing, and sleek, low. Oh, lovely. Absolutely lovely. So, yeah, I'll definitely give that a whiz, mate. No problem at all.
Fantastic. Tell me, is Steelhead going to be your dream destination, or have you got a dream destination, or a place that you fished that you'd love to go back to, or a place that you've always thought, this is the one I would really love to go cast a fly?
There's just too much water and too little time, isn't there? I mean, I fished in Argentina in 2018, and apart from the travel, that was the only drawback. The travel was the only drawback. I mean, the steaks were amazing. The lamb was awesome. The fishing was absolutely out of this world. And that was on the rivers like the Chimawin and various bits and pieces like that. Just awesome fishing. I'd love to go back there. I keep getting... I made friends with one of the guides out there, and he keeps sending me text messages. You should come back, my friend. Come back. What he doesn't understand is the 16 hours flying and driving, and God knows what that goes into getting there. But yeah, I mean, to us old Brits, it's a long time in a car or an aeroplane, 16 hours. But these fit young Americans and intercontinental fly fishers that we have, it's nothing to them, is it?
No.
But I'd love to go back to Argentina. I'd love to actually go back there.
Yeah, I can only echo that. And, I was lucky enough to be down there in January, and it is an amazing destination, but man, it's a hell of a long way. But we've spoken for over an hour now, and it has been great as always to talk with you. Your enthusiasm, your love and passion for our pastime, and still wanting to get people infused into fly fishing as you do is a magnificent thing to have. May that light never darken, because it's magnificent, and we're lucky to have people like you in fly fishing who are doing everything they possibly can to encourage people into our pastime. So I'd like to thank you for that. I would like to thank you for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast. Mate, as always, it's been lovely to catch up with you, and thank you for being a guest.
Great stuff, Pete. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I was a bit apprehensive, as you may have thought, being old and sort of crusty like I am. But, yeah, it's been great. And, long may it continue. That's as much as I can say. I think your Fly Culture podcasts have been absolutely wonderful enlightenments to people, and I hope this hasn't ruined the role that you're on, mate.
Me too. Tell me how, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want some advice, if they'd like some help, perhaps even if they'd like a lesson, you're sort of Swindon, Cotswolds, round that Wiltshire sort of neck of the woods. How do they get hold of you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram as good old Keith Passant, or not good old, but Keith Passant. A lot of people would say, no, he's not good old, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, Keith Passant, just have a look for me. I'm on Facebook, and then I'm on Instagram as well. So if you want to send me a message and drop me a line, then yeah, love to talk to you. I can let you have my email as well if you want, Pete, if people decide that they want to talk to me that way. But I'd love to hear from people if they want to have a lesson, fly tying, whether it's a long-term course type thing, or whether it's a little casting lesson or something. Then look forward to seeing you.
Nice one, buddy. Thank you so much.
Been great, Pete. You take care, and as they say in the trade, tight lines, old bean.
Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there'll be plenty more down the line. If you're enjoying these and want to make sure that you get each edition, please consider subscribing. I'm told if you do subscribe, that helps other people find us as well. I've absolutely no idea whether that works or not, but I've listened to other non-fishing podcasts and they say it, so I thought it might be cool. And if we can connect communities within fishing and get people talking to each other, fishing together, that would be really cool. So thank you so much for listening to the Fly Culture Podcast.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.